All right. Hello, welcome everybody. I want to take a moment to just thank everybody so much for coming to our event today. My name's Gina Villiotti Madison, and I am the Executive Director of NASH Knowledge. The reason we have you all here today is because it is International Nash Day. International Nash Day is a global initiative that's led by the Global Liver Institute. And there are organizations all across the world that are doing different things on social media, hosting different events to just get out there and raise awareness of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and its more progressed form, NASH, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which I hope I pronounced that right, because I always struggle. But we just really, from the bottom of our heart, want to thank all of you. We decided as an organization a while ago that there is a huge unmet need within the Hispanic and the Latino community as it relates to awareness and education around non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and around NASH. So we decided to make it a priority for our organization to really meet this unmet need. We created a Spanish language website. We translated all of our materials in Spanish. And one of the reasons we're having this event today is we really want to just get connected within the community. We just see that there's such a need to provide information and tools and resources within the Hispanic and Latino community to just raise awareness about this disease and to provide education. So we decided that for our NASH Day event this year, we would have it at the museum, which also checks off a bucket list item for my dad, who's our founder. And, but also, you know, Roberto Clemente was such a... Roberto Clemente was such an important member of the community as well, and just having the event here and having all of you just means a lot to us, so we can just share more about the disease and what we're doing as an organization. The theme for this year's NASH Day is Step Up for NASH. So if you have not checked out our social media, which you can find information on the materials in your bags, we did do a fun little video today to Step by Step by New Kids on the Block with our own lyrics to just raise awareness of the disease. So again, I just want to thank everybody so much for coming. I'm going to actually hand the microphone over to David Garcia, who is on our board of directors. He's going to introduce himself, and our other panel members will come up and introduce themselves as well.
Thank you. Good evening. Oh, wait. Is it on? Can you hear me now? Thank you. Well, wow, this is just a very humbling moment. I know I was talking to some people in the room, some people I've known for 17 years. When I started at Pitt in 2006 and graduated in 2013 with my PhD. Pittsburgh's home, and just to see this wonderful community start talking about what is affecting the Hispanic Latino community is very impactful. I was joking with my wife today, and actually one of the individuals, can't see him right now in the room, there you are. You know, when I was here, it was pretty much like me and Diego, honestly, as far as like the Hispanic Latino community. I was unaware of Patricia, like in the back, right? We were segmented. There are others. This is an emerging community. It's a community that needs support, and that's what we're here to talk about. When they asked me to talk today, it was like, oh, let's talk about NASH rates and so forth, and I will give you those numbers, right? I want to start first, though, about like the place that we're in. So clearly Roberto Clemente is a hero, and I started to think about like his impact, not only on the sport, which is just amazing. Like I just walked around here like a little kid, honestly, for the past few hours. I thought like first and foremost, like as a humanitarian, like this individual literally passed away doing what he loved, right? Jumped on the plane to make sure that aid was getting to those individuals. Although we lost him, I think the impact still obviously exists, and what he does for the charities and everything, like it just radiates. And so that brings me to my friend Tony. NASH Knowledge is that type of organization. You know, you had an experience that you wanted to share with the world because you know affected many others, and you wanted to be a community advocate. And honestly, for that, like I thank you. And I know whatever happens in this space, whatever happens in the future, NASH Knowledge will always continue on. So I want to pull you up really quickly before we go into our whole spiel, because I want you to say a few words, Tony. Come on over here. Surprise.
This is a surprise. I thought I was going to just sit back and listen to everyone else talk. But as Gina said, I mean, we grateful for everyone attending today. My experience with NASH began with the doctor telling me I had fatty liver. Didn't make a big deal of it. Didn't think it was anything serious. It developed into NASH, which is a more progressed stage. 9 years later, I was told I had cirrhosis, which my wife and I both thought the doctor had called the wrong patient because I don't drink. Isn't that that's drinker's disease, or someone who uses drugs, and I do neither. And so that was a shock. A couple years later, another shock was it developed into cancer. And a year after my cancer diagnosis, I had a transplant, obviously it was successful because I'm standing here. But, thank you. But what my experience left me with was that my life had been saved by the transplant, and I learned through my recovery that the fact that I knew so little about liver and liver disease was not the exception; it was the rule. And I thought my experience had left me with an obligation to try to help others not follow in my footsteps. So that's what led to the creation of the nonprofit. I talked to my wife about it, and she thought I was nuts as usual. But when we started the nonprofit, we filmed a documentary about my experience, and we tried to provide information that I wish I had had when I was diagnosed with the disease. So that's, as we, aside from my grandchildren and my children, this is the passion in my life. And there's other organizations that are larger than us, but no one is more passionate about spreading awareness and providing education about the disease. So after the surprise, I'm going to hand it back to David, and hopefully I can sit back and relax.
Let's all give him a hand. I love when a good plan works out, particularly a surprise. Because Tony, you took the words right out of my mouth. This disease is not talked about. It largely affects the Hispanic Latino community, so I identify as Mexican origin descent. We're number one out of all Hispanic Latinos for having the incidence of NAFLD and NASH and so forth, right? But it affects us all. So when I say Hispanic Latinos, we have Dominican, Puerto Rican, Colombian, everybody, right? But together we're all affected by this disease. So what we know, again, it's International Nash Day, right? It affects 100 million people worldwide. It's expected to affect 300 million by 2030, so less than 10 years. In the US, 100 million people are affected by NAFLD, right? So as we go through the spectrum, and largely, again, led by the Hispanic Latino community. Also, if you have type 2 diabetes or at risk for that, you likely have NAFLD, right? So this is the disease that no one's talking about or has largely been associated with alcohol use, and that's just not the case anymore. Everybody in this room is at risk and should be tested. So we're going to be talking about some of our work from the community, from a clinical perspective, from a healthy lifestyle perspective, and we hope you enjoy this panel. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David, and thank you, Dad. So I'm going to ask our other panelists to come up here. All right, so as David mentioned, we have folks that we invited to share different perspectives around this disease. NASH really does take a multidisciplinary approach to treatment of the disease. So, we have the academic standpoint here with David. We have the clinical standpoint with Dr. Martinez. And then Dr. Sobel is an endocrinologist, and she has a teaching kitchen within her own private practice. So I'm going to just pass the mic down and ask each of them to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about their background.
Thank you, Gina. And thank you, all of you, for taking your time to be here. And when we're talking about fatty liver disease and NASH, you might think, why is an endocrinologist up there? But as you heard Dr. Garcia say, if you have type 2 diabetes, you're at risk. And what's a common association with these two disease states is insulin resistance, which as in endocrinology, we have a lot to do with that. And so it's important, like Gina said, it's a multidisciplinary approach. A little bit about me. So Sandra Sobel. Indacochea is my maiden name. I'm first generation born here in the United States. Both of my parents are Peruvian. Peruvians are at risk too, right? And I remember moving here to Pittsburgh, and to your point, I said, where are the Latinos? Moving from Chicago, but it's a population that's quickly growing. I just spoke with Melanie. She said, just over so many years, we've grown 170% here in Pittsburgh. And I see that in my clinical practice too. So I focus on metabolic health, and it's been my passion to really address the lifestyle component, because there is so much we can do when we understand nutrition, when we understand exercise and stress and sleep, and empower individuals with that knowledge to do what they can. And as a physician, I'm a scientist. I believe in medicines and the rigor that goes into it, and I prescribe them and use them as well. But if I just prescribe a medicine and say, I'll see you in 8 months, and don't tell you why or how this process started, then what favors, or how am I actually helping you? And so that has been the driver behind starting this comprehensive approach to metabolic health. And I see a lot of fatty liver disease, which I will be able to talk about shortly, and share the experiences and what I work with patients. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the invitation.
How are we all doing? I'm Tony Martinez. So I'm the medical director of hepatology at the University of Buffalo. And it took me about 5 minutes to find the Latino people here. I went over to Atwood Avenue at Las Palmas, and I bought like 40 pounds of dried guajillo chile. They have good tacos out there too on the sidewalk. So my dad was Mexican, and he got killed when I was 3 days old. And my mom kind of, as one does, they kind of lost her way a little bit, and I lost that culture. And I got it back when, I went through a real rough spot in life, spent a long time on the wrong side of troubled waters, and then I went down to Mexico. I was in Guadalajara for my medical school. And I got there, and I realized immediately that everything was in Spanish. And I was like, gringo. Hola. ¿Cómo estamos? I didn't know anything. I cried myself to sleep every night for 6 months. And then, as one does, you meet a girl and then you learn Spanish real quick. But I run a clinic in Buffalo called La Bodega. And it looks like a New York City bodega. And it specializes in co-management of addiction, substance use disorder, and liver disease, both. So a lot of overlap occurs between the two. And that's a little bit different than some of just the conventional fatty liver stuff. But what we're seeing, and why this is especially important to me, we see, even though you have other liver disease, we see concomitant fatty liver disease. And we see a lot of it in young people. And we see a disproportionately affected population in the Latino and the Hispanic community. So for us, a lot of our model is based on outreach. We talk a lot about meeting people where they are. But to us, it's a little bit more abstract. It means something more than just going into where they live, like physically meeting them where they are. It means meeting them where they are in every aspect of their life. How they think, how they live, how they work, how they get to the clinic, how their day by day looks like. Can they get to the clinic? Do they have cars? Do they have transportation? All the things that affect folks day by day. Meeting people where they are is much more abstract, and that's really what we've tried to build our clinic on. And a lot of what we're trying to do with fatty liver disease education is built on that premise. So thank you all very, very much for having me here tonight. This is an amazing space. It's an amazing organization. I'm real proud to be here.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great segue to me. Thank you, because I'm literally both of them in a public health setting. So David Garcia, again, associate professor at the University of Arizona. So I'm in Tucson. It's about 50 miles from the border, basically, right? U.S.-Mexico border. Got my training at Pitt, exercise physiology, obesity prevention and treatment. Had the opportunity to go back home to work with the community that I would like to serve. Similar to everybody else, really started to understand that we had all this knowledge, we have all this privilege, right? It's education, it's privilege. But how do we give that back to the community members who honestly understand more than anything we'll ever know, right? Like what's best for the communities, how we get over these structural or systemic barriers. And that's what I do. So I'm a community engaged researcher. I work with and for the community. My work largely focuses on taking, as I call the toys, so it's called the FibroScan. It's a non-invasive test or non-invasive tool that you're able to tell levels of steatosis, so liver fat, and fibrosis, so that's stiffening where you get towards NASH. And I put it in community-based settings. So I like your bodega project, that's awesome. So I go to swap meets, which are like flea markets, outdoor flea markets here, outdoor markets, and I put the toys in settings that otherwise people would not have access to. And I say, you can have it. Just walking by, hey, what's that? Oh, would you like liver scan? Yes, we would. And I give it to them for absolutely free. Now, if they were to see a clinician, maybe a $300 bill if you have insurance, give or take. So really I think what I do also is advocate not only for the education, but treatment. So not only are we pointing at the disease, but how can we educate the community, hopefully treat, and ultimately provide choice? Like that's what we're talking about. So through education, awareness, knowledge, having discussions like this, we are giving individuals choice of whether they want to change their behaviors or not, or perhaps hopefully eradicate this disease in the future. But I think, Jesus, you're going to ask us some more questions.
I am, yes.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you for those introductions and again for being here. Again, it's just really important, the work that we're doing at kNOWledge. Each one of these individuals, really has so much expertise and background in this area, and I'm just excited to learn more. So I'm just going to kind of go down the row here in order. Sandra, can you tell us more? You talked about metabolic health. Can you talk about what you're seeing in your practice as it relates to that, and especially within the community here that we're representing today?
Absolutely, thank you. So so metabolic health is, the first question I get is like, well, what does that mean? And so metabolic health can take on a variety of meanings, but really what I focus on are conditions associated with insulin resistance. So that can be metabolic syndrome, that can be prediabetes, type 1 diabetes we see, insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and even obesity. So what's at the root there is when our pancreas, the organ in our body that's responsible for secreting insulin and controlling glucose levels or blood sugar levels, there is something going on within the body where the body's just not responding to this hormone the way it should. And that can impact a lot of other organs within the body, and fatty liver disease can be associated with that process. And so when we're talking about like, well, why does that happen in the first place? We look at lifestyle, right? And talk about, let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about exercise and movement. Let's talk about your sleep patterns. Let's talk about stress, because all of those have really important factors in the development of insulin resistance. And so in my clinic, so Summon Health is the name of my medical clinic, and people come because what I've recognized a lot more is that people are very much in tune with prevention of disease. And if they can prevent getting the medical condition, they want to know what they can do. But it's also important to get your information from evidence-based medicine, right? There is a lot of information out there. I mean, the internet, you can get any type of information you want to immediately. But when you're not medically trained, it is really challenging to filter out what's medical fact versus medical fiction or opinion. And so having a trusted individual where you can have these conversations about the questions you have in an unrushed manner is really important, so that you can feel empowered and part of your medical decision making rather than just being told what to do, or really important questions that you have just being dismissed, or we'll talk about that later. And unfortunately, given the constraints of the medical system, sometimes that conversation won't happen for months. And so let's have that conversation now and talk about what you can do to prevent future complications and make healthier changes to life now. Within the Latino community, we know that there is an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, of fatty liver disease, even obesity, right? The Mexican population, Puerto Rican population, especially when we're talking about type 2 diabetes, and we see that that translates also when we're talking about fatty liver disease. And so we talk about, well, what from a nutrition perspective, what does that mean? And how does that manifest? And so, you heard me say that I come from a Peruvian household, and so rice and potatoes and meat was every meal, every day. When I met my husband, he's like, rice and potatoes on the same plate? I'm like, doesn't everybody eat this way? Like, what's wrong with that? But and it's not that rice and potatoes are not okay, of course, right? But it's talking about the balance and how we're fueling our bodies and the nutrition, really understanding what that means, right? The difference between, you heard me talk about sleep and the importance of sleep, right? So depending on somebody's job, if someone's working shift work and they're working, constant changing shifts and night shift, well, that's gonna really disrupt the circadian rhythm. And what impact does that have on your insulin resistance? It has a tremendous impact. But if we're not having this conversation, then people can't understand. Or maybe you don't wait up to watch that show that you recorded on Netflix, because it's really important that you get that full amount of sleep so that you don't wake up with a high fasting blood sugar, and that insulin resistance can then also translate to impacts on liver. So these are conversations that I'm having with patients so that they can understand how certain habits can be impacting their health and what they can do within their power to modify those habits to improve their health. So people come also with lab abnormalities, and I'm sure my colleagues will talk about the liver function tests. And one of the things I think as a medical community we need to be better about doing, and I have seen that improve, is not dismissing mild abnormalities, right? Oh, your liver function tests are a little bit off. Oh, this might be fatty liver disease, right? We just heard Mr. Tony Villiotti say, oh, they really weren't concerned about it. This is a narrative, unfortunately, I've heard over and over again. When in fact we should be like, oh my, you know what? Your liver function tests are off. Let's talk about this. Let's investigate this before it becomes a problem, right? So really highlighting and having these serious discussions, because that is the time to intervene and prevent that from becoming a big problem.
Thank you. Well, that's great. And I think you just covered that really well. So I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Martinez to ask you, what are you seeing as a clinician? What are you seeing as people are actually diagnosed? And just give a little bit of your view as well as it relates to getting better with testing in the community, please.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is that everybody has fatty liver disease. And it's not even hyperbolic. It's a real thing. Literally every patient that's coming through the door, they may come in for hepatitis B or hepatitis C or some other thing. And when you do their imaging or you do their labs, there's some evidence that they have fatty liver. So this is something that's, I think, even underestimated. David was talking about some of the numbers. I would bet that that's even low, scarily enough. The other thing that we're seeing is a trend toward younger individuals. Yep. So this, you think about liver disease and you tend to think about baby boomer population, folks who are, older in older age groups. But what we're seeing is that it's happening more and more in young individuals. When we have patients come in with hep C that maybe are 30 years old, we do their fibroscan, they have stage 3 steatosis. So they have a ton of fat in the liver. So those are some of the clinical trends we're seeing. I just want to comment on some of the stuff that we just heard and expand on it from a clinical setting. A lot of times when we talk about all the interventions, the things that to us seem very obvious, right? Within the field of hepatology, there's this kind of like division between the people doing the research and the work and the people who it affects. And we've seen this. I was at a conference not too long ago, and it was a big, the whole day was spent on NAFLD and NASH. And I heard 3 presenters in a row who were on the stage, and they were from states where there's a large proportion of Latino and Hispanic patients. And all 3 individuals were on the stage and they were saying, can you believe they all live in places surrounded by fast food places? There's no sense of how folks live. There's no sense of, you can't just come in and see a patient and go, eat less, exercise more, sleep more, and you'll be better, right? It doesn't work like that. If life worked like that, no one would smoke, no one would be obese, way less people would get cancer, people who drank would stop, people who use drugs would stop, just like that. Flip a switch, it'd be over. Life doesn't work like that. So when we're talking to folks, we have to understand, how do you work? What happens when you come home? Because maybe I can say, yeah, well, if we reduce your stress, things will be better, right? What if you live with your stressors? It's not so easy, right? So we have to take all of these things into consideration when we're talking about this stuff. And when we're doing the research and the work to advance the science of fatty liver and NAFLD and stuff like this and NASH, we have to include the people who it affects. Any intervention to be successful has to include the stakeholders who it affects. They have to have a hand in it to push it forward. It's the only way, really, to make it work. And you know, you hear some of the stuff that David's doing. This is exactly what he's doing. This is exactly what you're doing with the test kitchen. Things like this, these are essential to really make progress in this space.
Can you sit on my NIH review committee? Can you say that on my
Give them all the money.
I mean, yeah, like it's, wow. It's you guys, we all let's go do a grant together. No, I mean, because that's what we do. Again, like we are in the community. So what Tony's mentioning is it's the social contextual factors, right? Like we study acculturative stress. We study aspects about the social determinants of health and how it affects health outcomes, such as NAFLD. We do a lot of qualitative work, so I know we're getting in science, but it's a balance. So qualitative work is doing like semi-structured interviews, focus groups to, again, have the community members lead the work that we're doing. We also work a lot with promotores, promotoras, and again, there's their community health worker-led interventions, which we take these evidence-based interventions and we put it in the settings. So all that context matters, and again, you can't change someone's zip code. You can't change someone's income. However, you can give them choice, right? Tortilla or corn, like flour or corn tortillas. You can have vegetarian options, and that's what it is for me. It's giving them choice.
Or teach them different ways to make different things that they, eat day by day, that they're certainly not going to give up because that's their, cultural foundation. And then you come in and you teach them a new way to do it, a healthier way, and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, so I had the pleasure and the honor of spending some time with Dr. Sobel in her teaching kitchen for March was National Nutrition Month. And I learned so much about how to cook healthier. I do not like to cook. I have 2 young children, and I do not always know the healthiest ways to cook. So it's just sometimes even just little changes that she taught me. So if you could just talk a little bit about what you're doing in your teaching kitchen, because I think that's such a great thing that you're doing.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So one thing that Dr. Martinez had said was, how unhelpful is it when we as physicians, as medical professionals tell people, well, just eat better and exercise more. I mean, we all know that, of course, like he said, right? That's 0% helpful. But we need to give specifics, and that requires time. And that's what motivated me to go into this space, because I can also give you ideas of healthier options, but what if we got dirty together in the kitchen and actually made it? Because you don't have to be a cordon bleu trained chef, which I am not, and I will also divulge that I hated cooking too at one point in time. My husband took over all the cooking when I was a fellow, and I was like, I just don't want to do it. And it wasn't until I started actually educating myself more about nutrition. I mean, we learn about nutrition in medical school. Different medical schools have different amounts, but not enough. And when I realized how important this is as part of disease prevention, is disease treatment as well. So it's not only prevention, but we treat disease with nutrition too. So I needed to be better about communicating that with my patients and doing it with them. So a teaching kitchen is called culinary medicine also. So we get into the kitchen and we actually prepare foods that are specifically meant to help with the medical condition they have. So when we're talking about metabolic health, and here we are for fatty liver disease, I talk about the importance of increasing fiber. And I joke with people that my mission here in Western Pennsylvania is to cure fiber deficiency, because that is a big problem that we have, okay? So if we can focus on the importance of fiber and the impact that that has on health, and focus on increasing fiber, right? Instead of saying, don't do this, and don't do that, and don't do this, and don't have this. You know, you talk about, well, carbohydrates are bad, so we need to eat less carbohydrates. No, crappy carbs are bad. So let's talk about crappy carbs and let's not eat that. But the complex carbohydrates, that's what you should be eating. And I'll tell people, I hope the most complex part of your day are your carbohydrates. That's what you need to be taking in. So let's reframe what we're actually talking about, the composition, okay? So complex carbohydrates, let's get more beans in. Latinos do great with beans, right? Let's talk about lentejas and let's get lentils in. You know, all of that. If we're gonna be talking about our grains, let's make them whole grains. So brown rice, right? Arroz integral. Let's talk about the different tortillas. And there's flour and there's corn. Why might one be more preferable than the other if given the choice, right? And so really framing it about the quality of the food and in educating people about why that's important, they can then take these, they're transferable, right? So you go to a different situation, you're like, oh, I identify this as being a higher fiber food. I'm gonna opt for that, right? And fats, right? So talking about saturated fat, right? And the good fats, right? So we know what happened when we told everybody to go on a low fat diet, then sugar came in, refined sugar. Those are the crappy carbs. Those are the ones we want to stay away from. But if we start to educate, like, okay, well, there's different types of these macronutrients, and these are examples of food that are really high in this type of saturated fat, which contributes to fatty liver disease, along with the refined carbohydrates. How can we choose foods that are healthier, we feel better, blood pressure goes down, our liver function enzymes improve, our fasting blood sugar improves, and here we are achieving this state of health that we're really trying to seek. So in that teaching kitchen, here we are. So for example, yesterday was a patient, we made crispy corn chickpea patties with brown rice and cilantro and red onion. And instead of it being a processed meat patty, here we are using canned chickpeas, brown rice, things that you can get from Aldi, which is just a block and a half away from my office. So it doesn't have to be expensive. Health doesn't have to be expensive, and we don't have to sacrifice flavor for health too. That's something that I try to emphasize too, because there's a misconception that you're gonna be eating cardboard. That's not true, right? And so it wasn't until I realized that having higher fiber foods, lower in saturated fat, I actually now really enjoy cooking, looking at different recipes and the colors that these different plants and these high fiber foods, these lean animal proteins provide. You get excited, and people can feel that, and they look forward to making these different meals.
Thank you, appreciate that. So Dr. Martinez, I'm going to ask you, so in your clinic, so there's no medical, there's no pill right now for fatty liver disease. There's no medical treatment. So a lot of it is nutrition based, which is great. But when you see people who are not making those changes, how do you treat them? How do you have these conversations with them in the clinical setting?
Yeah, this is hard. And this is, this goes back to not just food, but anything, alcohol, drugs, whatever the case may be. How you have the conversation, I think, it really depends on the individual, right? I mean, there's certain, you have to ask why until there's no more why, right? Like, why can't you make the change? What's the reason? I'll tell you a story. This has nothing to do with food. This has everything to do with alcohol. So I had a lady, 60 years old, and she drank about 8,000 beers a day. And she went to the bar every day, and she was 65 years old. And she came in, fulminant cirrhosis, liver's dead, can't get a transplant because she's still drinking. And I said to her, I was like, Diane, you don't even like drinking all this beer. And she said, no, I know. She said, but I've been going to that bar every day for like 45 years, and it's all my friends. And I go and I play keno, and then the day goes by and I drank 8,000 beers. I said, okay, she's not going to stop, right? Because this is her life. This is her social network. This is her reason for being. So I went to the bar. I met the bartender and I said, hey, can you stock NA beer, non-alcoholic beer? And the bartender said, well, I don't care. Can I still charge $3.50 a beer? I said, oh, I don't give a shit. You charge whatever you want for it. But just, can you have it on the shelf? And he said, yep. So I said, okay. So Diane went back. I said, Diane, you're going to ask for the NA beer. So 3 months later, she comes in the clinic. Her jaundice is gone. Her ascites is gone. Her MELD score we calculate for how messed up your liver is gone almost to normal. And she pulls out of her bag, she's got an Old Milwaukee NA beer. And she said, you know what? She goes, I go every day. I drink 8,000 of these ones. I don't know what they did, but I look better. And I said, you look great. And she said, I gave it to my friend Linda. She's not yellow anymore either. So this is a harm reduction approach. So how do we engage the patient? What do they need you to be? What do you need me to be? A priest, a brother, a son, a doctor, a cop? What do you need me to be in the moment that I'm in the room with you? That depends on how I try to engage you, right? So if some folks just, they cannot eat better. They don't cook. They're not going to go to the store. Somebody's bringing them groceries. They're on fixed budgets. They're going to get what they get, and they're going to have that, right? It goes back to the thing at the conference. They're like, I can't believe that everybody in this region of San Antonio is obese. Yeah, it's the only thing that's available. When you have to feed your family and you can go get a triple quad pizza for $8, you're not going to go to Whole Foods and get a head of lettuce that's $14, right? It's just how it goes. But if they have these interventions where they can come in and learn, like we know day by day, we know how you eat, what you cook. Let's figure out a way to do it a little bit better, just a little bit better. I'll tell you one other thing before I'm done. It's rare that I tell a patient, you have to stop drinking or you have to quit smoking. Because you know what happens when you tell somebody you can't do a thing? Any of you got kids? Second you say that, man, they go right, and they do it times 10, right? They say, no, it doesn't work like that. I said, you've been drinking your whole life. It's arrogant to think that just because I went to doctor school and I know some stuff, that I can sit in front of you and say, you gotta stop because it's bad because I said so. And they go, yeah, but I've been doing it for 40 years. You ain't gonna wave your magic doctor wand and make me stop. It doesn't work like that. So you go in and you say, can you drink half as much? You just cut it down by half. Don't stop. Just go down by half. You'd be surprised. They come back and they're like, hey, I'm down to half a case. Yeah. And you have to praise them. Mm-hmm. Love them, capital L, love them for that effort. And you'd be surprised, they'll come back again 3 months later, and now maybe they're drinking a 6-pack. And things are better. It's not 100% off like you wish it would be, just like weight loss. Maybe they're not going to drop 50 pounds just like that. But they might get off 10, and then they feel a little bit better. And then they see, oh, this is a little bit of a different way. You're like a tour guide through the jungle. Right? I'm just trying to show you another way. Mm-hmm. I don't expect you to walk into my world, but take my hand for a little bit. I'll lead you down a path or two, and maybe we make some little improvements, little by little, small steps, little wins. That's kind of how we approach it.
I'm just going to add to that because we need more people like this guy, honestly, clinicians. Thank you for sharing. Because really, I think, again, to create the change is all of us having humility, right? Like, again, like I feel privileged to have higher education, all of us, I think, in this room. But humility is the key because people feed off of that, right? And kind of meeting where they are, I think, is very important. The other thing, too, I know we've been talking about some of the deficits in our community. Like, yeah, like unfortunately, we do have some of the highest rates of disease. But we are very resilient. We are a strong group, right? Like culturally bound, family is everything, you know, and so I think that's the other aspect too that I'd like us to consider is how do we, like what you did was basically you took interest in this individual, it made it a strength-based approach. you went and met her where she was, and that's why it was successful. And so I think, again, like, we are in this room, which literally I think is like the epicenter of Pittsburgh, right, for Hispanic Latino things. Like, this is it, potentially. But how could we, as a group, move forward with that humility, focus on these strengths, and build upon those strengths within our communities? Identify those individuals, and I've met individuals today that I've never met that I should have, honestly. So how do we continue to do this connecting? And that's where I think Nash Knowledge and these individuals right here, like, I'm excited for what's to come in Pittsburgh and to see that.
All right, well, before we close, I just want to see if there's anything that any of you wanted to say that you didn't have an opportunity to share yet.
I don't know if anyone has any. I don't know if there's can be a Q&A.
Yeah,
If there's
I
any
can-
Yeah, are there any questions from anybody?
Surprise.
Just throw it out there.
This is fun. So curious to hear you guys. I think we were talking about the speakers at the beginning is that none of the speakers were Latino. One of the biggest problems is that we don't have healthcare professionals who are Latino. I'm a pediatrician. I'm seeing kids with non-violent liver disease. My question basically to the doctor is, your services, how are they covered by the insurance? Are they covered by the insurance? Can we refer families to the kitchen? How does that work?
Thank you for the question. So I am an adult endocrinologist, and so I don't see adolescents younger than, or individuals, I guess they're adults, right? Younger than 18 years old. So the services that I'm doing right now is direct care. Any type of medication or imaging test that needs to be done, labs need to be done, all through commercial insurance. What I do through my kitchen, so about every 6 weeks on average, I've been partnering with dietitians in the Pittsburgh area and doing a free Zoom cooking session. And so people can sign up for free, and it's usually a Tuesday, it's sometime during the week, and we have a plant-based menu. So when I tell people plant-based, then immediately they look at me, they're like, I don't want to go vegan. I'm like, I'm not trying to turn people vegan. Again, my quest is cure fiber deficiency. Because it's very easy. I think we all know how to add meats or animal products to it, but it's more like, how do we prepare vegetables in a way that isn't just steamed and gross, right? So how can we make it more exciting? So it's purposely a plant-based meal. It's through Zoom, and now, right, in our community too, there's access through social media, on our phones, and that's something that's easily accessed on the phone. And so we have people join. Anybody who signs up to this free registration, they get access to the recording afterward, as well as the recipes. But also, I have some of my information on the table too. I'm always happy to speak with individuals about the services that I provide, and yeah, thank you.
If I could just add to that also before I take more questions, one of the reasons we're having this event today is so that we can connect with other organizations in the room. And one of the hopes that we have as an organization here at Nash Knowledge is that we can partner with folks like Dr. Sobel and even like folks like the Latino Community Center, other organizations where we can work together to get grants, where we can provide free programs to the community and those who need them. So I'm just like putting that out there because, this isn't just us coming here and sharing a lot of information, but also how can we start thinking about how can we all work together to help not just our future generation, which to me as a parent myself is so important, but also adults who are struggling with the disease as well.
Hi, thank you. I just want to say how amazing this presentation was. I'm a pharmacist, so I wanted to ask Dr. Sobel what your take is on the role of GLP-1 agonists and the role of NAFLD prevention, progression, like Ozempic, and then briefly comment on statins too and NAFLD.
I'm very happy to share my thoughts, and then I'll also ask you to share your thoughts too, as a hepatologist seeing this a lot in clinic as well. So I just also went to the obesity medicine conference. So I'm obesity medicine board certified as well, which was in New York City just a month ago. And we had a hepatologist speaking about NAFLD and NASH and the data for GLP-1 receptor agonists. And so this, just for those of you who don't know, this is a medication, and I guess now it's like, how do you not know? I guess that was part of the opening monologue of the Oscars, is like, who's your dealer? Who's your dealer? Because this is the injection Hollywood medication that, you know, it has been getting a lot of media coverage for the weight loss. But these medicines have been out for greater than a decade. Okay, these are not novel medications. It is getting the attention it deserves because they are great medications, but let's remember what they are. And as with any medication, there has to be a clinical indication and there has to be an understanding of what side effects are, and there's always a cost, right? So when we're talking about food, so appetite as well as insulin and weight regulation hormonal pathways, GLP-1 is one of those hormones. And this medication, when you inject it, can attach to a receptor, and in general, people feel a decreased appetite, increased satiety, they feel more full, and it does attach to some receptors within the hypothalamus in our brain that help with energy expenditure. And so one of the side effects, which can be a desired side effect, is weight loss. And looking in NASH and NAFLD, so there are studies that show that there can be benefit with reducing steatohepatitis. When it comes to further outcomes, the studies don't show any significant benefit in that way. But as far as looking at the percentage of fat within the liver, there have been studies that have shown that that can be a very real improvement. There are other drugs, that hormonal drugs in the pipeline, so GIP, GLP-1 receptors also being studied actively. There's recently, I think, a study that showed that maybe there wasn't that big of a benefit with GLP-1 in fatty liver disease. And so we keep on looking at different types of medications. There isn't, as Gina said, and I'll let Dr. Martinez talk shortly, but like there aren't any medicines like, you have NAFLD, this is for you, right? So a lot of different drug classes have been studied and may show some benefit, but it's, as with any medication, looking at the cost benefit. And when I'm seeing people with NAFLD, I'm also seeing people, they also usually have concurrently prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, they have obesity, and increased visceral adipose tissue. So I have a body composition machine in my office. And for that reason, we're addressing all of these, and this medication can be particularly helpful, but keeping in mind side effects, okay?
Yeah, side effects, cost, and availability are all big factors, because these meds are in, you know, a certain segment of society, and they're very unlikely to get to maybe the base of the epidemic, right? That all said, yeah, maybe, look, fatty liver, basically, fat inside the liver creates inflammation. Over time, that inflammation turns into fibrosis, scar. More and more scar develops, you can get cirrhosis, you get cancer, you need a transplant. It's literally that simple, yeah? So you take these medicines, you don't eat as much, you lose weight. When you lose weight, the fat comes out of the liver. That's good, right? Because there's less fat, so that percentage of fat is less inflammation to turn into scar, and less potential to go forward. What the medications don't do right now is reverse scarring that already exists. And that's really where we're interested, because it's not just enough to give you Ozempic and you lose weight, and then as soon as you can't afford the Ozempic anymore, or something happens, your insurance changes, guess what happens? You stop the medicine, the weight comes back, fat goes back in your liver, you're right back to square one. So you just kind of kick the can down the line, right? Didn't change how you eat, how you cook, how you live, the stressors for why you eat the way that you eat, none of that changed. All it did was make you eat less for the 6 months that you could afford it, right? The trick now is reversal of fibrosis, and those medications is still a ways out. And the thing about fatty liver disease, it's really hard to study, because the only way to really, there's no non-invasive biomarkers that have been really valid where we can use them to figure out. NAFLD takes 20 or 30 years to go from the beginning to the end stage. That's a long time to study something, right? And there's no clear endpoint. Like We design a medication. How do we study it? By the time 30 years goes by, how many people died because we couldn't get the medicine to them? And you think about fatty liver, in a lot of people, it will not get to that point, right? There's like 20% that will progress to NASH and develop cirrhosis. How do you predict who's going to progress? And we don't understand the makeup well enough of NAFLD to predict who's going to develop NASH. It's called the phenotype. We don't understand the phenotype well enough to figure out who's going to progress, and we can't prevent what we can't predict. And that's the biggest problem that we've had right now. I was at the FDA about 10 years ago, and we had this conversation, and I was at the FDA about 3 years ago, and we had the exact same conversation. So we're still a little bit of a ways off. I think the interventions like changing what you're trying to do, how you live, how you go in your day by day, that's going to have a significantly bigger impact than just some of these medications that suppress it for a while.
Hello, Professor Gomez, University of Pittsburgh and Casa San Jose. My question is for the lead. So, as a community engaged researcher, let's say you would partner with Casa San Jose, a community organization, how would you approach an intervention in the community for the 34,000 plus Latinos here who live in 112 of the 130 zip codes, so everyone? That's kind of community. How would you?
It's a good question.
Magic bullet.
That's a great question. First, I would talk to you. No, I'm just no, yeah, so yes. So with any type of community partners, community engagement, first and foremost, like you would go to that community partner. Assuming they have all the health needs assessments, everything kind of put out, like they have to kind of tell me it's the problem, then we start engaging all community partners. So that's what Nosotros, my program does. So I have over 40 community partners. You engage like the key stakeholders in the community, get everybody at the table. And by I mean like everybody, I mean not the CEOs or whatever, I get the community members at the table so they can tell us what's affecting them. Within Pittsburgh, it's very unique, right? Like geographically, the hills, the areas, and so forth. So if I were here, I'd probably have like satellite clinics. I've seen different aspects up. I would fight, quote unquote, fight for different administrations to get the fiber scans and other non-invasive tools into the hands of community members. So I work a lot with federally qualified health centers. Mm-hmm. So, and in general, like everybody should have access to those tools. And then I would probably make like a training program. I'd develop a promotora program throughout Pittsburgh that was really focused on chronic disease more broadly, like the multiple comorbid conditions, and then partner with the clinicians. So basically a multi-step approach, but it would take time, right? And really then I would then tailor the intervention. So that's one part of my work that I do. So I'm one of the few researchers in the country who have developed a weight loss intervention specific for Hispanic men. So again, that's why I come back to like the positive aspects, the positive assets of our community, right? Take all these strength-based approaches, then tailor our programs. Yeah. So not only they're evidence-based, I think even going back to the medications, honestly, I've got into it with some higher ups about, okay, like these medications are showing a response, but let's see it broken down by race, ethnicity. How are Hispanic Latinos responding to these medications? We are not seeing diversity in our clinical trials. So again, part of that aspect is we do this work. It takes about 17 years to become an evidence-based intervention, but it's not getting disseminated to the community. So the other thing that I would do, lastly, to respond, is take it out to the community. Like, it's great that I can put science out. I can get papers, we can do presentations like this, but in reality, we have to do more community outreach, NASH knowledge. We have to engage the community members and show them what they're part of. And then lastly, advocate for their health. Everything that we do, all the data that we collect is theirs, right? So I would give everything back. And not only knowledge, but my resources. So that's what I would do.
Can I just add one thing to that? You know, a lot of times with public health, we kind of look at it like 10,000 feet, and we have to come up with the intervention that hits all of them at once. And I think sometimes, in my clinic, La Bodega, we've got a version of our clinic in 30 states across the country, and then in Europe, in a number of different countries. And I think the trick, to build on what David was just saying, the first thing is that one size doesn't fit all, right? There's the Latino umbrella, and under that is a million different things, right? So sometimes you don't have to hit all the zip codes. You need to hit 3 of the zip codes and make it work. And then you take and you learn what are the fundamental aspects, the foundational aspects of the program. So for Hep C elimination, for example, we've been working with the Biden administration for the past year for a federal Hep C elimination plan. And they're trying to model some of it on what we've done in our clinic. And we said, look, the fundamental things are screening, linkage to care, and treatment initiation. Now you can export that to fatty liver. You have to screen and identify them, then you have to link them to care and initiate them on some form of therapy. Those 3 foundational principles never change. Doesn't matter the zip code, doesn't matter the state, the city, the population, those things always stay the same, right? But how you do that is gonna look different maybe in each zip code with each population. So foundationally it can look the same, but then it's going to look different after that. And I think the key thing is that one size doesn't fit all. And it exports to so many different disease states. But a lot of times we try to make the algorithm make one thing that works for everybody.
Thank you.
Go see your shop. Yeah, man.
Before I start, just want to thank Gina for this wonderful event, this forum. A talented trio of medical experts, and we're in the museum of the first ever Latino baseball superstar.
Yep.
So there's a lot to be said for that. My name is Amadeo. I'm from Argentina, the recent winner of the World Cup. Yes, guys, I'm still celebrating. My question is more general for you guys. I grew up, my dad was a physician, or is a retired physician, rehabilitation, physical medicine. My point, though, is most of his friends were doctors, Latino doctors, and he was part of the Latin American Medical Association in Tampa. And I grew up with all these Latino doctors as role models. So I guess as I got older, guys, whatever clinic I went to, I always looked for the Latino doctor. So if it had a Lopez name, a Sanchez, Gonzalez, I just felt more comfortable. So my question is more of a general question, and I'll give it to you, Sandra, because you're my friend, is why do Latinos make such good physicians?
Amazing question. So, I shared with you that, my parents were born and raised in Peru. I was born here. My parents aren't physicians. There were no physicians in my family. My dad's one of 9 kids. He was the first to come to the United States from his family. But I remember my pediatrician, and she was from Germany. So she, first of all, was a woman. And she had an accent. And I identified with a woman with an accent because that was my mom. And when I saw her and just her way of treating me, I was like, well, why can't I be a doctor too? And so that was the impetus of, oh, I can do what she does. And then to go specifically to your question, like, why do Latinos make such good doctors? I mean, we're in your face, right? Like, you go to whatever Latino function, there are no secrets. Cheeses everywhere. And we do it out of jest and out of love, but there is no personal space, right? It's like, tell us everything, and then you can understand, right? And I think part of the culture too, it is surrounded around unity, family, food, baile, all of that, right? It's loud and it's dramatic and emotional, and so is health, right? It is. It's emotional, and so we want to know. We really want to know what's going on with you. And so we'll ask the questions, and maybe we'll run behind in clinic, right? But that's the doctor you want to be with, who's going to take the time and sit down and knows, how's Tia doing and how's your sobrino doing, and that really has that interest and understands your life to personalize care for you. Because yes, algorithms work on a population base, but you're the patient in front of me right now. And then they start bringing their family to you. And then you start thinking, well, I guess I should have weekend hours available too. But again, it's family, right? We're not treating patients, we're treating family.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's just different with Latin people. We love real hard. And we talked a little bit about authenticity, and patients know when you authentically care about them. And they know when you're just in there and, trying to get in and out of a room. And they can smell when you capital L love them. And I think that we're especially good at doing that, because we're in your face, and like you said. And I also, one last point you raised it earlier, about how you were saying on the stage there were no Latino physicians. And you're saying you saw some of these role models, and you see that disparity, right? And I had a conversation. There's a kid here tonight. His name's Carlos. He's from Dominican Republic. He just got here 3 months ago. Carlos, stand up real quick. He finished his medical school. He's studying now to get a residency in the U.S. We have a responsibility as providers to not only prop up these kids who are coming up, but we have a responsibility to find them and mentor them, support them, grow the seed, because they're going to be the ones to carry this work forward. They're the ones that really take anything that we all started and take it the next step. So tonight's a great example of that. I mean, he walked in here, he didn't know nobody from nobody. He's been in the country a couple of weeks, and he's here tonight. So, things like this, we owe it to bring them up. So I think it's important for us as providers. We can't forget that.
Thank you. Again, just being back, it's humbling. I'm looking at Diego. So when I started 2006, master's student here at Pitt, I didn't know Patricia, I didn't know you, right? Diego was the only professor that I've ever seen in my life that identified as Hispanic Latino, right? I could interact, and I remember saying I could be that, right? And I think that's the point of I identify, I could do that. And so really, I'm not a clinician, I'm a public health researcher, but really just giving the opportunity to our students, the high school students, even my kids, all about livers. My son will say all day, he was asked, if you were given $1 million, what would you buy? He said a FibroScan. Right? And so again, I think we need to see more representation, we need to see more training, and again, that humility. We have to pay it forward. So thank you for saying that.
Bobby, I just want to tell you that as an endocrinologist, I have 2 kids, and if you asked my son, what would you do with $1 million? He'd look at me with a mischievous smile and say, I'd buy Sour Patch Kids.
It's really funny you say that, because this video that I mentioned earlier, as I was posting it, if anyone's ever posted to TikTok and you're trying to add hashtags, it just plays over and over. And my daughter was sitting right next to me, and she said, we keep singing about how you shouldn't eat sugar, and now I just want sugar really bad. So that's the opposite effect that should have had. Any other questions before we wrap up? Oh.
Hi, thank you for this. So my name is Vicky. I'm from the Latino Community Center, and I'm an Argentinian too, so that's why I celebrate. So I'm curious about how the community responds, because for us, the community is really growing in the county, but the need also. So for us, it's really hard to think about health education, where there are so many social determinants around health that are not covered. So if they need housing or food, so it's hard for us
I'm from the community health worker program, so I was happy to hear about the base program. So I'm curious how the community responds to us, because for us it can be like tricky to try to see where to start talking about prevention and health education when we are facing every day all these difficulties. So I'm just curious about how your experience with that.
So, first of all, how do you all feel about Messi going? Right? That's big news. No, but I do think, like, you make a really good point at the community. So there's many competing interests. There's a lot of things going on. It's not just chronic disease, housing. I mean, right now, even with COVID, right? Like, I'm so happy we're just in this space. But in reality, a lot of people didn't get care during COVID, and we're starting to see some of the effects of that. You're in the right setting, because talking to Gina, Tony, kNOWledge is using that community partner. So it's capacity building. So you can't cover the knowledge or education, but you know what? You have a group that's very hungry to do that, and will partner with you. So that's what I would recommend to you, is take, not advantage, but work with the tools that you have available to you, and then slowly and incrementally start making that process go forward.
Yeah, and sometimes, don't overthink it either. Sometimes when you're sitting in front of a person, and in my population, it's a very high-risk population, affected by substance abuse, and getting patients to trust you, right, to come back, like not lose them to care and not lose them to follow. The trick, for us at least, is sort of like that immediate connection. What do you need right now? Right this second, what do you need? Do you want a cup of coffee? Do you want, what do you need? Do you need a hoodie? And we start there. And then we kind of come in with the rest of it. But that like immediate just put your hand out thing to them, it does something. If we come in and we're like, hey, we have to deal with your substance use. We have to stop drinking. We got to do all the medical stuff. And they're just like, whoa, there's this immediate sort of like barrier, So, and in my clinic, we don't have any hierarchies. Nobody goes by titles. Everybody knows you by your first name. Every patient gets your cell phone number. You're not allowed to wear a white coat. There's none of that. And when they come in, that's exactly kind of how it begins. It's just a very casual, you need something right now. And then the rest sort of follows, after that. And then like David was saying, you have all these resources that are available, but it might just take that little bit of a spark to get them with you.
And just to add to that as well, one of the things that we do have at Nash Knowledge is we've created a wealth of resources. We, when you're ready to have those conversations, we have 5 animated children's videos in both English and Spanish that just speak about liver health. We have posters that are back there. We have one-page overviews. We are also hoping to come in and maybe be able to partner with you and other organizations to do in-person sessions where we will provide the people who are actually facilitating it, so you can focus on some of the other things such as helping them get housing and other things that are really important. So I just wanted to share that.
Gina, all the panelists have spoken about the importance of meeting people where they are. So, as opposed to sitting back in your office and looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. Can you talk a little bit about what Nash Knowledge is doing on that front, what our stance is?
Sure, and that was not a planted question. So we consider ourselves a grassroots organization. So we have spent the first 5, we will be celebrating 5 years of existence this coming September. And we've spent those 5 years just building a lot of tools and resources and trying to understand the needs of different populations, children, Hispanic Latino community, people with type 2 diabetes, people who are struggling with obesity, and just building those tools and resources. So we have all of that available, but we've really been focusing on, especially over, I'd say, the past couple years, post-COVID. Since COVID's been over, we have been going out into the communities. We've been trying to find health fairs, community events, ways that we can just engage with the general public to meet them where they are. We also have really put a strong focus recently on social media. I actually had a woman I met at a networking event, and I was talking about what I do, and she said, oh my goodness, my son's 15, and he was just diagnosed with fatty liver, and we're actually going to Children's tomorrow, and they had an appointment with his hepatologist. So she went home, and she was telling his son about me and what I do and my organization, and he said, I know who you're talking about, I've seen her on TikTok. So really trying to understand and meet people where they are, and as it relates to your community, to the Hispanic and the Latino community. Obviously, I am not from that community, but we've saw a need that existed, and what we're really striving to do is working with partners who are from the community. We have Danielle at that back table, not to call you out, Danielle, but she's our intern for the summer. She's a pre-med student at Pitt. And she speaks Spanish. So how can we utilize her to engage with other students? How can we utilize her to get out into the community? Luz Amanda let us come to her tent and her booth that she had at the World Square in Market Square last weekend that's going on again this weekend. She had me come speak to students that were visiting from Brazil. So just really engaging with folks in the community and understanding how can we find those opportunities to meet people where they are. Not just mentally, right, but physically as well, online, in person, and just finding those opportunities. So we really, really are there to work with others. We really want to partner with folks, throughout Pittsburgh and beyond, to really, share the information that we have. And what we've also found is sharing personal stories. You heard everyone kind of speak about how they've related to my dad. His story just touched them. So when you have people who have gone through this and they understand, and they're not just speaking to you, just like you talked about, even understanding people's hearts, showing that love and just showing up for them and saying, listen, I get it. Like, it's not easy. We have a support group as well. We've actually even had interest to start a Spanish-speaking support group. We don't have somebody who can help with that at this time. But it's something that we're really striving to do. But being able to, really just say, like, I get it, I understand, this is not easy, right? Until there's not a specific medication directly for NASH or fatty liver. So right now it's a lot about those lifestyle changes, those interventions that Sandra spoke about. And that's not an easy thing to do. My son is overweight, and just even with my dad's experience, I've been trying to work with him. And we actually met with a dietitian from Children's, and she said, I never tell my patients, you can't have this, you can't have that, like you're saying. It's, what can you change? How can you make different changes? So just really trying to relate to people and show that we understand it's not easy to make these changes, but it is possible. And it is so incredibly important, as I think, again, I said this before, not just about adults struggling with this disease, but as a parent myself, and knowing that 10% of children today have fatty liver disease. I actually just read an article recently as well that said 1 in 4 children in the United States are of Hispanic and Latino descent as well. So you think about that, and you think about how this disease is growing and what we need to do, the steps that we need to take in working together as a community. I think it's so important. Any other questions from the audience, comments?
It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we thank you all so very much. It just really does mean the world to us that you're here. We really would love to work, with folks in this room. So please reach out, come talk to me. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the night. I know we went over, but the questions were great.
It always
and it's
does.
always, yes. Right, yeah. I'm Italian and I can relate. We're very loud. We're very passionate.
It starts late and it goes late.
Yeah, we never know how to say goodbye. So thank you all so very much. I don't even know what time it is. Okay, we still have time. The food's gonna be out for the rest of the night. There's about a half hour or so. The bar, they're gonna be opening the cellar back up as well. I strongly encourage you and just come and tour the museum or network. All right, thank you so much.
Awesome. I wish you guys were here.
You're amazing. You're amazing.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Dude, like, oh, yeah.
It was nice.
Nice.
Phenomenal group.
No,